Hi, the purpose of this video is to introduce you or take a little bit of a deeper dive into the writing multiple choice section of the TSI 2.0. And this is actually going to be more than one video. I'm going to just deal with the first part of the multiple choice section, which is the longer passage questions. So I don't want to I'm avoiding trying to make these videos too long. Okay, this is me. I am the academic dean at Thomas Jefferson High School. This is my third year with the district, but this is going to be coming up. I'm making this in June of 2021, but the 21-22 school year will be my 30th year of teaching. That is my email address if you have any questions and you would like to reach out. All right, so the multiple choice, let's put this up here because I think it's going to work better up there. Okay, the multiple choice, this is going to be questions 16 through 30 on the CRC section of the test. If you are unfamiliar with the TSI, if you don't know the format of it, the types of questions the students are going to get, there is a more introductory level video where I just kind of do an overview of the test, and I do recommend watching that first. But if you already have a pretty good idea of what the makeup of the test is and you're just looking for some advice, a little bit more detail on some of these questions, then this video is going to work really well for you. So the writing multiple choice is going to be questions 16 through 30. This we know. This is going to be consistent. Everyone starts the test with the multiple choice part, which is the CRC, and that stands for like college readiness classification or something. You're going to come up with two different types of questions. You're going to have the essay revision and editing questions, and that is going to be what this video today is going to be about. And then you're going to have your sentence revision, editing, and completion, and that's going to be dealt with in a separate video. Okay. So we're going to take a look at questions 16 through 19, which are going to be the essay revision questions. For some students, this may be the easiest part of the test, and it's going to definitely be one of the more familiar parts of the test because it is patterned after, let me say that again, it's similar to STAR. I don't think it's patterned after STAR, but it's very similar to the revision questions that first appear on STAR. Okay, so I'm going to, so there's 4 questions, and they're going to be based on the draft of an essay that it's kind of a fake draft of an essay that could potentially be improved, right? They're going to have some questions where it's going to be like, how would you revise this particular part? The sentences in the draft essay are numbered for easy reference. So if there's 19 questions, all 19 sentences are numbered. Obviously, since there's only 4 questions, they're not going to be asked about every single sentence. So the numbering is to refer to these sentences to be able to refer to the sentences easily. And as I mentioned before, the set of questions is actually pretty similar to the revision questions that you would see on that begin the STAR 1 and the STAR 2 test. If you're familiar, if you're not familiar with those tests, that's okay. You're just going to learn it as you're learning the TSI. But if you are familiar, if you were to kind of compare those two sections next to each other, you'd be like, this is pretty similar. Okay. This is probably, depending on the size of the computer that you're using, this is probably pretty hard to see, but I'm not intending for this to be something that we look at together. I'm just wanting to physically show you what this looks like. This is like a draft of an essay, right? Okay, I actually found this student model online and I sort of tinkered with it a little bit to make it possible to ask questions about. And then underneath that will be the question. Okay, this is obviously, if you're familiar with the format of Canvas, you can tell this is from Canvas. The College Board one will look a little bit different. So on the TSI, when the students actually take the TSI, this passage up here always stays. So they're going to get the passage and the question underneath it will change. Okay, so once they click the answer to this, they'll click their answer, they'll click submit, and then the question disappears and the next question appears. So that's how it looks. So the essay is always going to be there. It's just going to move the question. All right, so this is physically kind of resembles what it looks like. Of course, not exactly. The formatting and the fonts and everything is going to be a little bit different. So these are the types of questions. Anybody who's ever seen, I'm just going to send myself away. Anyone who's ever seen a video that I've done before knows that I like to teach students how to handle different types of questions that they're likely to see. And from studying this part, studying all the sample questions they've put out, these seem to be the main types of questions that students would see on this section of the test. Adding transitional words, revising sentences, combining sentences, adding sentences, and deleting a sentence. And so here's how the questions tend to look. Which of the following should be added to the beginning of sentence? And that would be sentence 3 or sentence 4 or whatever sentence number their students are being asked to look at. What is the best way to revise sentence 4? And they typically do repeat it or reprint it in the question so the students don't have to look back up at the passage. What is the best way to combine sentences 7 and 8, sentences 9 and 10, whatever the numbers are would be there. Where would be the best placement for the following sentence to be added to the essay? So then the sentence would be produced below. And I'm going to show you samples of these questions, so don't worry. And then which of the following sentences could be deleted from the passage? And that would be taking an already existing sentence in the passage and deleting it because it really doesn't need to be there. So for the remainder of this video, I'm going to show you a sample of each one of these, and I'm just going to talk about some strategies that you can use with students. So the first one is adding transitional words. And so I am going to momentarily exit out of the full screen version of the slideshow so that I can show you what a sample question would look like. And so I'm going to pull this one up. Okay, so this is the preview version of it. So this is the first question. So let me actually make this quite a bit bigger so it's not so hard to see. Okay, so you would get this. Which of the following should be added to the beginning of sentence 4? And that's where you get your transitional elements. Additionally, however, on the other hand, for example. And so, of course, when you do this, you would go look up at sentence 4, and you need to see the relationship between sentences 3 and 4. That's what I tell students if they're handling this question. What is the relationship? Is sentence 4 adding an example? Is sentence 4 contradicting? Is sentence 4, whatever the relationship is between them, that's really important to understand if you're going to pick the right transitional element. So we see a number of orphaned male elephants have been transported to the park in order to provide them with a safe and nurturing environment. This is a step to protect the elephant population soon threatened another endangered species. So what I see when I look at the relationship between sentences 3 and 4, because we're adding something to the beginning of sentence 4, I'm seeing that these are kind of like perhaps not opposite ideas, but this presents sort of a conundrum, like this was made to protect. And naturally, I want to add the word but, or, which is the case in this one, I want to add the word however in. Because this was to protect the elephants. However, another threat emerged as a result. So to me, the relationship between those two sentences is best connected by the word however. Here's a couple things that I'll say about these, and they are very likely going to get one of these questions. So it's nice for them to know how to get these right. I want to say one thing, but I want to say that with caution. This is not a type of question that students typically often miss. This is not a question that students tend to be worried about. That said, it is a question that could potentially trouble a student who's a second language student. That's been my experience, are the English language learners that we work with. Those nuances of the language, those prepositions, transitions, those can be a bit sticky for them. So if you are wanting to do direct instruction on this, if you are finding that the particular group of students that you've been asked to work with are not missing these, don't add more work to just assume they're going to get them right and go on with it. Point out to them that they need to see the relationship between those two sentences, but if they tend to get these right, if they tend to be able to add the right word in, just move on. But if you do want to do some direct instruction, I had a couple resources that I am linking in the slideshow, but I'm also going to put these into the Canvas classroom. I'm not able to do that right now because Canvas is about to go on pause and I don't want the work to be lost. So I'm going to add these back in when Canvas is available to teachers again. So one approach you might want to take, especially if you're working with students for who English is not their first language, you may want to teach them, and this might be an overwhelming list to work with at first, but this sort of framework is a bit helpful, where you teach them, maybe you want to say, okay, we're going to learn some that have to do with cause and effect. Like maybe we're going to talk about that. And maybe you pick 2 from each of these lists, and the ones that tend to appear on these lists, and you can sort of teach them those relationships and what are common transitional elements that express those relationships with each other. So you can, again, if I were working with students who really struggled with these, I would not use such a long list. I would probably narrow it down, let them be, and I would probably pick the ones like however, or in fact, or for example, that we tend to see on testing a little bit more, that I would really reinforce those. I wouldn't feel the need to teach them like 60 transitional words, unless you have a student who could sort of handle looking at all that stuff at once. I also found this is another resource that I linked. This is another one where they have kind of an insane number of transitional words. But then the reason that I linked this is there are some exercises for this if you wanted to do a little bit of direct practice. Again, I don't know that direct practice is going to be necessary for every single student. So you just need to assess the students that you're working with. And if they're getting these right, you don't need to dwell on it. Okay, so that is the adding transitional words. They will get one of those. If your students do well with these, great. That's just one question they're probably going to get right, and that's always good to know. Okay, once again, these resources are here in the slideshow, but I will also put them in the Canvas course. All right, the best possible revision. This is probably going to be the hardest question to sort of prepare students for, because there's a lot of different things they could ask you about. And I'm going to go into detail on these in separate videos. The ones that I've seen used the most often, actually, though, is the ambiguous or unclear pronoun reference. And what that means, and let me actually show you the sentence so I can show you what that means. Let me show you the question. That's right. Okay. So we looked at this one. Okay. So which of the following represents the best revision to make to sentence number 9 reproduced below? They want you to kill young elephants, but they could not afford to have any more rhinos slaughtered. So this is, if you were to look back up at the passage, one of the things you would notice, I know you guys would because you're such, we're English teachers, we're good readers. There's really no clear reference for they, okay? So you'll see that question asked a lot, and that is a little bit easier. So if they get a vague, ambiguous pronoun, they usually can figure that one out. But you can also tell them to be on the lookout for that. Replace they with park rangers, which is actually going to end up being the correct response to this one. You will often see these questions where there's a pronoun, it's either referenced not at all, or the reference that comes before it doesn't make sense. You couldn't necessarily, what I mean by reference is this word, you can't really draw a line from this word to something that comes before it. There's no antecedent. And I don't want to throw on really confusing technical language here, but there's nothing that pronoun actually refers to or replaces, because that's what a pronoun is supposed to do. It's supposed to replace, but you can't replace something that doesn't exist. So you will often see a lot of times the word it, and in the other passage you see a question, or the other quiz that's on there, you see an example of that where it's like it, what does it refer to? So that's what this particular one is, and I did see that as the sample in both the practice tests put out by the College Board, so I made sure I included that. So that's what's meant by pronoun reference. And if you actually, when you're working on these with students, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with pronoun reference, if you circle it and say, draw an arrow to what it's replacing, and then if they can't draw an arrow to what it's replacing, that's where the mistake is. So, but the best possible revision, I just have a feeling that they could call on some other areas too. So I'm going to talk about those in a separate video if you need a little bit more guidance on those. Best way to combine sentences. Okay. I think this is probably going to be, okay. The best way to combine sentences, at the risk of oversimplifying, one of the things I like to tell the students is typically your most concise response is going to be your correct one. I don't know if that works 100% of the time, but I think it will work a lot of the time. And I don't want students, I always say to them, you don't need to burn 500 calories on every single question. If you can find like this one, and you can trust your instinct on that, but that's typically what happens. And a lot of times students are drawn to the wordy responses because they're taught that writing a lot is writing well. And so a lot of times some of the distractor choices are going to be wordy and awkward. They're going to be like, tons of words. They're going to add words that don't need to be there. This one here is probably the most annoying thing to have to deal with. They're always going to put a distractor choice that is usually a comma splice error. So they'll take the two sentences that are being combined, and I'll show you the sample question in a moment. They'll take them and just separate them with a comma, and I can't tell you how many students want to pick that because that's exactly what they would do. I don't know why comma splice error is such a popular mistake to test, but it is. So I would try to, if you can, include at least some discussion on the comma splice error, because it will also help them on the second set of questions, which I'm not going to talk about in this video, but I'll talk about in a different video. So if they could learn this, which is super hard, and if anybody could come up with a foolproof way to make sure students never write comma splice errors, they would do very well, because it's something that we all struggle with, and it's a really popular error to test on something like STAR, TSI, SAT. So I don't know why I think if I go this gets, yes. So if you want to work specifically on this skill of combining, okay, if you just want to make this something that you make a lesson about, I would look into coordination and subordination. If you want to talk to students about when is it a good idea to have the ideas be of equal importance, and when is it a good idea to take one idea and subordinate it to another, that would be a lesson. That would be a lesson or 2 or 3 or 4 that you might want to do, the area of coordination and subordination. I'm going to do a video about that as well. For me, now, if you have students that you have 3 hours to get ready for the TSI, I don't know that I would spend time in coordination and subordination, but if you're just wanting to build this skill in students, I would have them take a look and start using those terms with them. Let me show you what that question might look like. Okay, and here's what that question might look like. All right. What is the best way to combine sentences 6 and 7 reprinted below? So here we go. The elephants went on a killing spree. The elephant slayed almost 40 rhinoceroses, including the incredibly rare black rhino. So I'm going to show you what I talked about with those distractor choices. So the second choice, this is here, and it's incorrect because that is a comma splice error. And if you're not familiar with the term comma splice error, that is okay. Maybe you've heard it called a fused sentence. Maybe people have called it a run-on. It's basically separating two independent clauses with just a comma. You technically can't do that in American English. In American English, you are supposed to either have a semicolon here, or you're supposed to add one of the 7 coordinating conjunctions like and, or, but, whatever fits meaning wise. But they're always going to, to me, when I see this, they're combining 2 sentences, they always make it so that one of the correct choices is a comma, or one of the possible choices, I should say, is a comma splice error. Students are inevitably drawn to that one because that is how they tend to write those sentences. So it's a habit we try to break in them, but it is difficult. This one is an example of, and so the elephant slayed almost 40,000. So I'm adding extra words. That's one of the things you'll see in the distractor choices is extra unnecessary words. By going on a killing spree, the elephants, this one to me, maybe there's nothing technically wrong with this. I can't point to it and say, ooh, a mistake. It just sounds a little bit awkward. This third one is the elephants went on a killing spree, slaying almost 40 rhinoceroses, including so this one, again, this subordinates the ideas poorly. Okay, this is really, they went on a killing spree. This is the main idea. This should be the dominant idea in the sentence, and everything else is subordinated. So, but this one, even if you're not using the terms subordinating and coordinating, you might say that's a little much for my kiddos. Tell them to trust their instincts. This one sounds the best. It really, really does. It just sounds a lot better than the other ones. It sounds a lot cleaner. It sounds a lot more concise. So if you also teach students to sort of trust their instincts and start pushing them towards those more concise options, they're going to get these questions correct. So there's 2 more types of sentences, but just before we finish this section of the video. deleting a sentence. They're often going to ask you, or a question that they'll often get is, which of the following sentences could be deleted from the passage? And so I'll just put this full screen for a moment. So oftentimes, the correct choice is one that just provides information that's really extraneous or distracting. It doesn't need to be there. It's like randomly they're talking about something else. So students really need to make sure that they pay attention to the context of the sentences that they're considering deleting. In other words, they need to read a little bit before and a little bit after the sentence they're considering deleting. And that way they'll know, what is the pattern set by the writer? What is the writer getting at in this part? If they're talking about, the need to control, like the elephants slaying the rhinoceroses, and they suddenly give a random fact about like the elephant trunk, it's like, that's not necessary. That breaks up the flow. And so start to get them to pay attention to what sentences seems like just like it randomly goes off in a different direction. What's a sentence that provides unnecessary information, right? What's a sentence that provides the information that the passage really didn't need to cover? So let's take a look at what that sentence, or what that looks like. Okay, and this would be the fourth and final question on here. Which of the following sentences could be deleted from the passage? And so when you go back up here, this is exact. If we look again, and let's say we thoroughly look at all the different sentences, and we get to here, the elephant slayed almost 40 rhinoceroses, including the incredibly rare black rhinoceroses. Black rhinoceros can be distinguished from white rhinoceros by the hook on their upper lip. They did not want to kill. Notice how sentence number 8, I know you notice. I know I'm not teaching you anything that you couldn't figure out without this video, but that's what I would tell students. I would just say, which of those sentences just seems to kind of veer off and sort of distract from the main purpose of that paragraph? And of course, it's sentence 8. This is nice to know, like trivia, yay, but it really does disrupt the flow of this paragraph. And so we want to try to teach students to be on the lookout for that, to try to not realize something is random and does not belong. The final type of question that they might get is the opposite, which is where would we add a sentence? So adding a sentence, so presenting the students with a sentence and saying, where would this fit best in the essay? So of course they need to really carefully read the sentence they're about to add, right? They need to add that and see what that sentence is all about. Then they need to read the sentences from the passage to see if those sentences have related ideas to the sentence they're attempting to add to the passage. Okay, so what I mean by that is they need to look at the distractor choices, right? And they need to decide if those choices have some kind of relationship to that sentence. So I'm actually going to go to a different, passage, because there was only 4 questions on that one, so I couldn't show all 5 of them. So this is called brain research. This is a totally different quiz that the kids can take, a practice quiz that's on the TSI course. Let me find that. Okay, and you'll see this one also has what should be added, because that's a very popular question. All right, so this one is, what would be the best placement for the following sentence to be added to the essay? You get this, and then you have all these different potential spots where it could be. So what I would instruct the students to do is I would instruct the students to look at these sentences and sort of see, is there a relationship between this sentence and sentence 6, between this sentence and sentence 7? Like, where do you see, does one sentence sort of add information? Does it make sense? Does it follow logically? And if we look up here, this part of the brain is responsible for reasoning, controlling, and we look up at the context. The prefrontal cortex has a growth spurt just before puberty and then prunes back in adolescence. So when I look at this and I go back to my sentence that I'm trying to think about adding, this part of the brain, this has to connect with something that comes from the sentence before, right? What part of the brain? That needs clarification. And because it's probably referring to this, right? So it would make the most sense to add that sentence before sentence 8. because it has a logical relationship with sentence 7. So it would make the most sense for it to go here before sentence 8. So that would be the correct choice to that one. So that's what I would tell students. If you're trying to figure out where to put this sentence, kind of compare it to the choices that you have and see which two seem to go together, what two seem to have a relationship to one another. And that will be how you get that one correct. So this, in my experience, is something that the students tend to do really well with. So the temptation might be, well, if they do well with it, I'm not going to spend much time on it, or I'm not going to spend perhaps even any time on it. And that's a fair point, but I want to give you something else to think about. One of the things that when I started doing a ton of intervention, I had a teacher tell me, and it happened to be a special ed teacher in Harlandale, tell me that we always focus on what students can't do. We always focus on what students are not good at, and we try to make them better at it, right? Which makes sense. She goes, but what about when you're thinking about tests and you're thinking about how they test? What about thinking about what they do well, and how can we make sure that they deliver on that part of the test? Because that's something that they're already going to get many questions right. How can we turn many into all? So if they're good at this kind of stuff, if they get 3 out of 4 right on this section, how can we get them to get 4 out of 4 right? So when we do intervention, I try not to think about it just in terms of, oh my God, they're terrible at this, I need to make them not as terrible. But I also want to think about, well, they're already really good at this type of question. How can I guarantee that they really deliver on this part, that they don't miss any in this section, so that they can miss more on the reading part, or whatever the part is that they're strong at? Teach students to really capitalize on that. Teach students to be proud of that, and teach students to be like, this is the part you've always done really well on. Do this as well as you can here. And then the other part, just do the best that you can. So think about it. If students do well on these types of questions, just give them those few tips and tricks so that they definitely don't miss them. Okay, so I'm going to bring this video to a close. But if you're looking for the second type of question, which are more the sentence level revisions and more like correcting the mistakes, that's going to be in a subsequent video that I will make. Thank you for your attention. And remember that you should not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions for me. Thank you.